Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Revolution of Being podcast. We are on episode 3 of our second season, but also 3 in our discussion on the ego. So today we're going to talk about letting go of the ego and really the discomfort of that experience. So most of our listeners who are on this podcast are on a spiritual awakening path. And when you begin to start detaching from the ego-based identity, you kind of enter unfamiliar territory, and it can be really scary and unsettling because the version of you that existed before is no longer the version that's before us. And so it's kind of this spiritual in-between area, often described by many people as like a void. It can feel like a crisis, like a life crisis or something, but it's actually the beginning of the remembrance of who you really are. And we're talking about, even outside of manifestation, there's so many layers, Jess, you and I have gone through when it comes to our spiritual awakening. And a lot of it falls into the new age category. But what we're talking about is really next level growth that's even beyond the new age realm. And this is really the dissolution of the ego. And so have you ever had that moment though, when the things that used to define you, so maybe it was your role as a parent, your role as a business person, your role as someone who, loves shopping, whatever it could be, begins to just not fit anymore. And it's kind of like one day you just wake up and you're like, this isn't me. I don't know who I am, but this isn't me. And you kind of just feel a little lost. But what if what you're experiencing is not a breakdown, but it's this spiritual shedding, the shedding of the ego, the layers that no longer suit you, the layers that were never yours to start with. And in that shedding, though, you and I know that's when the miracles and the miraculous happenings really, really start. So just launch us in, because this is, you and I can dork out for freaking hours. We do. We send voice memos back. If y'all don't know, Jess and I spend hours daily, talking via voice memo, and it's all about this stuff. And you and I, certainly are like spiritual soul sisters in this life, ready to catalyze each other on our journey. And this is how it happened, through discussion, through conversation, through questioning our beliefs and being like, hey, what do you think about this? This doesn't resonate anymore. Like, where are you at? And so I love that the people that are tuning in are also kind of hearing our growth in real time, but also hopefully getting a lot of value on their journey and maybe starting to really disband some of the things that just no longer fit, but you don't quite know what's next. So just launch us into this, because this is such a good topic.
Yeah, so I save all of our voice chats, and I swear someday I'm going to write this coffee table book. I don't know, the ramblings of something. So if anybody has any creative titles, we're open to suggestions, but it'll be a bestseller someday as we, unravel our own minds in real time. So yeah, this whole identity crisis that we start to go through, it gets labeled as, sometimes a midlife crisis. This usually happens in midlife. It's not that it always does. I actually think some of the timelines, I guess we could call it, are getting earlier for people. So I think younger people are starting to experience this, which is why we saw such a profound shift even prior to 2020, where people are trying to go, what is my purpose? Where do I fit? What am I here for? I want my life to be meaningful, but it becomes this identity crisis. And maybe it's because we're older, we've had more years of identifying with the job, the hustle, the parenting, whatever it is, that when it starts to dissolve, which is really a good thing, we're supposed to change. It can feel like the world is falling apart. It can feel like everything is crumbling around you. And again, it's what is supposed to happen. I think that, it's a slippery slope for some people. Carl Jung, he talks about that a little bit just with shadow work. I mean, I really feel like this is that shadow work. It's really this deep investigation of all these aspects of who you are and this integration of it. So, it usually starts with kind of that aha moment of like, you're maybe driving to your job that you've had for 20 years and you're just starting to go, I don't even notice where I drive anymore. I just follow the same route. I do the same thing every day. It can be as simple as that. It's questioning, what have I achieved? What's my legacy in life? Have I done anything that feels meaningful? It can be all of a sudden recognizing that your children are growing. It can come in all these little forms, and it can happen in midlife. Sometimes it happens to people in trauma, people who have gone through catastrophic events with their own health or witnessing somebody else losing somebody important, that they suddenly start to question everything. And again, it's a gift, but it can feel so empty. It can just feel like everything's ripping apart. And then it certainly can happen during a spiritual awakening. You and I have talked a little bit about, psilocybin and different journeys that people have taken, and people experience, even that death of their own ego in that. And they can experience that in breath work, in
Mhm.
Kundalini. There are more than one way. There's more than one way to experience something like a spiritual awakening. But in those moments, they also experience this sudden unraveling where they're facing something their ego has produced, which is a fear of dying, a fear of losing. You've experienced that. So all these crises that we encounter are just trying to drive us back in to re-explore who are we really at the core. We might mistake it for going through a depression, or maybe, I hear a lot of people saying it's burnout and failure, but truly it's this burning away of the ego, and its purpose is to help the reemergence of the soul. But we often try to stop it. It's like turning off a fever. We try to medicate it to be suppressed, um and then it just draws it out. You're going there either way. So you're going to the other side. So if you think about it, it's sort of like that caterpillar just morphing inside of that cocoon. It doesn't really know that it's becoming a butterfly. It doesn't know that. It didn't go into the cocoon with like this logical explanation of, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to reemerge with this new identity and this new life, and I'm going to fly. I'm not going to crawl on the ground. I'm going to fly. It just thinks it's ending its life, and it is. It's just not the way it always appears. That's transformation. And so we are walking in faith with that. Um, But the biggest thing that comes out of this, Angie, and I want you to talk about it, is it's that void that you start to feel because the space gets cleared. It literally gets burned away. So can you talk a little bit about the void and what happens in that space?
Yeah, and I mean, you and I have have lived in it, and we've talked about our journeys before. So you've been on this journey, more, I would say, more awake than I have for a lot longer. We're all spiritual beings having this human experience, so we're always tapped in, but the level at which we're tapped in is variable, and I think it progressively throughout our years, it draws us inward more. And I think for a lot of people, I just want to kind of address this topic of the catalyst. Midlife is a big point because at that point you've achieved a ton, right? Like all the things you wanted as a kid, for many people, you've already done. You've got the career that pays well. You've had a lot of life experience. You've had a lot of material things, right? Or you've traveled and done this stuff. Yet there's still this lack of completion. You don't feel complete in yourself and others, or there's just like you're chasing for more. And I think that's why right now is such a pivotal time, especially not to get political, but with the conversations of inflation and tariffs and all these things, people are really freaking out about spending power. And I'm like, but what if this is an invitation to stop spending and to go in? What if all these things that are happening outside of us are forcing us to go in? COVID was the perfect experience of that, right? Because whether you believe in COVID or not doesn't matter. We were all forced to isolate, and we were all really, some people didn't as much as others, but a lot of us took that opportunity to be really self-reflective and kind of think like, what do I want with my life? Like my job shut down. I'm stuck at home. I have all these like things that are no longer accessible. And so, that can be a catalyst too. And I think the times really are kind of pressurizing so that we are forced to do that. So when it comes to the void, it's really a space, as you mentioned, where the ego begins to collapse, but we're not yet that butterfly. So we're in this like space of discomfort where it can feel like emptiness, right? Like, okay, well, if all these things I have externally aren't satisfying, what is? Like, what can I have that's going to deepen my purpose, right? And I have so many people within my business, and probably you too, who are like, I just want to find my purpose. And there's like that seeking, and they're so externally focused. And I was too, like, it's got to be out there. It's got to be in a certain job I have, or in the healing of, these traumas, or the healing of autoimmunity, or whatever. But what if the purpose is to become more enlightened? What if the purpose is to spiritually awaken on such a profound level that you realize that the ego is just trickery, and that none of this matters and is real? And so a lot of folks can say, like, I feel really confused. Like, I don't know what my life purpose is anymore. I don't know what I'm doing on this planet. I don't know who my real friends are, right? Like, I've lost a lot of friends in this process because people can't relate to where I'm at. And, within that too, it's like, well, shoot, if my job doesn't matter, if like none of this is real and I'm just freaking here on this planet, what am I motivated to even do? Like, what's the point? And that's kind of that dark night of the soul energy where you feel like, I just don't have a direction anymore. I don't know who I am. And it's really common. I met with somebody last week who's like, I just am in this isolation phase. And it's like, yes, that's really normal, especially when you're first awakening. You have all this knowledge and you realize the inversion of our planet. Everything that you thought was good suddenly becomes not great, right? That was me with the Western medicine model. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so inverted. It's sick here. It's keeping people paralyzed and stuck in the system. And so mine was kind of starting in there, but then it branches to all these other systems that we are exposed to within the world. And we realize, like, nothing is as we seemed. But you can't tell people that because they will think you're batshit crazy, right? Like, oh, hey, there's spraying crap in our sky that is real. There's studies that show you cloud seeding. And like, they're doing all these things that are harmful. And people are like, that's not real. That's conspiracy. So you start to sound like a lunatic. And I've had people around me who are like, are you okay? Like, and so you just very quickly shut up, because you realize it's not safe to talk about this on a larger scale. It's becoming more so now. Like, these things are coming out, and especially, again, love or hate Trump, I don't care. But with the new administration, there's a lot of disclosure happening, and people think it's conspiratorial. And it's like, this stuff's been happening for years and years and years. We're just now lifting the veil on it. But again, it's very common, if your social circles are people that aren't awakening, you don't feel comfortable to talk about this because the version of you that you're becoming is such a drastically different version than the person who was in those circles and experiences before. And you also feel a sense of grief, right? The loss of the old identity, the old relationships you had, you and I talk about this often, like, man, ignorance is bliss, like, kind of joking, like, you couldn't pay me to go back to that life. However, it seemed a lot easier in a lot of ways because I was just kind of coasting through. But man, was I unsatisfied. I was so dissatisfied by life. I was so void of true peace that, you kind of grieve the old, which is the ego tricking you, saying, oh, it's never going to be the same. It's never going to be as good. And oh, you lost all these friends. You're never going to find new ones. You're never going to have the life you want. But that's all ego trickery. Ego is external. It wants to project outward that which is wounded inward. And so it's going to look for all these reasons why you should be sad about what's happening, and try to keep you trapped, which is the ego doing its thing, because the ego, the last thing it wants is to be spotted, to be seen, to be found out, because that means death of the ego, which that's what we want, right? Ego death. I mean, that is what Jesus attained before he was on the cross, was absolute death of the ego, which is salvation. When we talk about salvation in the Bible, it's meaning finding eternal life in the totality of our essence as one with God's source, that we are not these separate beings here. We are a part of it all. But again, the ego wants us to believe we are individual people on this planet, and that you're, someone who's going to attack me, and that person out there is doing harm against me, and all the wars and terrible things that are happening are, absolutely horrific, when it's like, but this is just all a reflection of the inner turmoil that we have to resolve. And I read a book recently, and one of the quotes was, we will never have inner peace, or rather, we will never have outer peace until we first have inner peace. And a ton of spiritual teachers have said that. We have to first go within to do that work before our reality reflects it. And that's not to say that there's not going to be war and different things, but your ecosystem, your peace is your own to attain. No one else can do that for you. And you can't wait on external environments, circumstances, things to create that, because you will never, ever, ever find it in this world. Ever. It has to start with going within. And so, the void, it feels empty, but it's not. It's really that process of that creative energy flowing back into you, that life essence force of true eternal life, right? So if you feel like you're in this void of like nothing makes sense, go forward, keep going, because you're on the right track.
Yeah. It's that whole bypassing conversation we've had before. And I understand it. I understand why we internally feel like we want to bypass. We want to avoid touching the hot stove. We want to avoid the pain. And this is why the void feels so uncomfortable, so unbearable. I've been there, you've been there. I've worked with people who are there. I think it's a normal part of life. We're all going to go through it in one way or another. You lose somebody, that creates a void. You lose a part of yourself, that creates a void. It could even be material things, because your ego is growing and it's dissolving away so your soul can emerge. So things to look for, because when we talk about ego and soul, for you and I, this is really common language. I can identify when my ego is starting to take the steering wheel. Sometimes I don't catch it right away, but I can identify it later on, especially once the ego sits back down and my higher self comes in and it's like, look at that. Okay. So the ego thrives on this doing, proving, hustle, achieving, better, 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 better environment. In fact, you sent me a thing on Instagram this morning. It was about ice baths. And for women, I don't care where people fall on this, but you and I have a lot of interesting conversations about things that create a ton of stress. And we're just like, yeah, I did it. I did this and I did that. And I mean, I got rhabdo back in 2014 because I wanted to be a CrossFitter and I wanted to be super tough. And I worked out with rhabdo. I should have been in the hospital, but instead I toughed through it, because that was my ego saying, you can prove yourself worthy. You can do this. And we were talking about that in contrast to what it actually does to us. I'll let you know that the ego can come in and save you from maybe falling off a cliff or getting hit by a car. It'll serve its purpose. However, it's probably always going to be more detrimental to you than it is beneficial. So we're not really taught to sit with the discomfort. So whenever you feel that, like, I need to go prove myself, this is a worth thing. I need to run. I need to be better. I need to hustle. I need to grind. I need to make more money. I need to climb that ladder. If you can pause and just say, that is my ego, you could actually allow yourself to sit with it. Most people cannot sit with that. And I learned this years ago. Meditation was always very hard for me. And I still struggle with it. I struggle with needing sensory things. So I often have a earbud in, I have music going, I have a book playing. I have to be doing. And it is very hard to just say, you know what, for 30 minutes, I'm going to sit in silence. I mean, 5 minutes in, I'm crawling out of my skin. And I was taught long ago that means you're doing something right, because you have to retrain your body to accept the stillness. And so this takes your ego and puts it in its spot. Like, no, you're not going to come in here and interfere with my connection. My soul's doing work right now. And the ego and soul, they don't really cohabitate. And that ego is like, but what about me? What about me? So it's a discomfort that you have to kind of train yourself to go through. It's going without the external validation. A lot of people feel invisible if they're not getting recognized, if they're not being seen. I mean, social media pointed that out in such a massive way. But it's in the silence, it's in the stillness, it's in the meek. The meek shall inherit the earth. There's a reason that is in scripture. It's not sitting back and being a doormat, letting people walk on you. It's not that. It's walking forward in silence. It's being able to carry your conversation inward and connect with God. And this goes back to the point you just made. If we live in a world daily where we feel like we are separate from God, so just hear me out on this, that we are separate from our source, then why wouldn't we work harder, hustle more, try to prove ourselves, sacrifice, achieve on whatever level to try to be okay enough to be worthy of God? Versus the I am connected. He who lives in me is greater than he who lives in the world kind of a thing, that I am connected, and my connection is strengthened through stillness, through just allowing the being, through the rest, through the hearing. How are we not provided for in every single way when we believe in wholeness versus separation? Just blows my mind. And so we just kind of glamorize the hustle. We see evidence of it all over social media. I love social media too, but it can just morph into a complete ego trip, and it won't serve your highest good. And you'll keep learning these same lessons until you learn to recognize it, be still, and just be. And there's a spiritual paradox to this. I kind of touched on it, but I want you to dive into that a little bit more. How this dying of a part of you is more of a birth. Talk about that.
Yeah. And it's so interesting with the hustle culture. I read the David Goggins book. I think it's called Never Give Up or Don't Give Up or whatever. And I was like, oh, this is so interesting. And then I'm like, oh my God, this is so toxic. I'm thinking that sweet man needs Jesus and he needs therapy. And then I'm like, oh my goodness, like that is the complete example of ego. And I'm sure he's a great human. And I don't mean that with any judgment whatsoever. But that is the toxicity of the culture we have of achievement. I'm not worthy unless, and it's like, well, no, you're worthy because you are. That's it. Like you never had to earn God's love. Like you are God's love. And we forgot that. And I think you make such a beautiful point of we seek outwardly almost in this like unconscious attempt to prove ourselves worthy. And that is completely egoic, kind of further acknowledging the illusion that we're separate. And it's like, well, no, we just have to remember. And, I used to tell my clients that, and I still will, depending on where they're at on the path, but that the ego has served an important part of survival. The more I understand and undo my own ego, I completely think that's crap. Because, and you'll like, as you listen to our podcast, you're seeing Jess and I evolve in real time. And the things that, maybe we said a few months back don't pertain because we're going so deep into our growth and really powerfully into integration of these things and even challenging the beliefs that we've had, even including the belief, of like this ego serving its important part. Here's the thing. The Holy Spirit, God's not going to walk you off a cliff. You don't need the ego to protect you from that. Like you will be serving out your divine purpose on this planet. This is, I'm going to stop myself from going too far down the rabbit hole here, but you're going to serve out your divine planet, whether the ego's there or not. Like you might just take different paths depending on how much the ego is in control or not. The ego is not going to keep you alive. Like it's not, if you are truly following the guidance of God, that voice within, you're going to be having the most magical, mystical experience so far beyond what the ego can provide. And, there's been plenty of people, I think of Jim Carrey as one who is like, I want everybody to experience riches and wealth so they can realize that's not it. And he's a really interesting dude to listen to. He's definitely on a deep spiritual journey himself. And it's like, you'll find that you can have everything in the world and not be happy. And again, that's the ego wanting more, more, more. Why do we see these tech billionaires? Not that it's just tech, but these billionaires and trillionaires just constantly seeking for more domination because it's ego driven, because the ego will never be satisfied ever. It doesn't matter how much money is in your bank account. So, we talked about how the void feels kind of this, we feel, empty when we have the ego beginning to dissolve. But it's really like this spiritual paradox of the void that you started to speak to was that the void, it feels like we're dying. Like the Angie of old is no longer here. But it's really that rebirth process, which is so beautiful because you're remembering who you truly are, which is that part of God, the essence of God. And I've been reading in a book too about how like it's even not appropriate to say soul because that's to assume individuality, right? So it's like it's the self of God is the remembrance, not the soul, not the individual, but that like we are all God here on this planet, and that's really triggering for some people. So if that triggers you, just sit with that, right? That we are of the essence of God and we are here. And you know, you and I both have lost people along the path and lost friends and lost relationships and changed careers and done all these different things. But I know that I can attest to the fact that my life, I'm at such a place of profound peace in my life, not because my environment's perfect, not because I have $1 cajillion in the bank and I'm debt free and whatever, but it's because I have peace in my heart. And I know I'm on the divine path I'm meant to be on and that I'm just doing what I'm here to do. And so, you'll find that peace when you start to really take those steps into that void and surrender the things that are being released. And it might be, I know people right now that are in the throes of, do I get a divorce? Very misaligned relationships. And that's to the ego such a threat. Like, oh my gosh, I chose wrong. What are people going to think? How am I going to survive this? How am I going to financially be able to manage? And the ego will throw every freaking like stop sign in front of you to make you not move forward, even though maybe the highest path is a separation of that relationship because it's not aligned for you. And, you know, you're not ever, this is something too you and I talk about often is like, you're not messing life up. Like you're just kind of reorganizing priorities and you're not playing by the old rules, which were for a lot of us, go to school, go to college, get a job, 9 to 5, put money in your retirement fund, eventually retire, maybe have some grandbabies or kids along the way, and then die. You and I were like, well, forget that noise. That's not why we're here. Like, yeah, maybe those things are a part of our path at some point, but there's such a deeper calling that all of us are really awakening to. And it's scary because the ego likes substance. The ego likes tangibility. The ego likes, like you said, the veil of social media and proving we're good enough, we're pretty enough, we're worthy enough, we've lost enough weight, we go to the gym enough, we whatever the frick enough. And when we're not in that and when we're living in the void, it's scary to the ego because there's nothing there. Like you're just that discomfort of skin crawling, like you speak about. And I still get that in meditation, and I resist meditation a lot. I like to have my podcast going in the morning. I like to have things always happening around me, stimulation, learning, all this stuff. And the discomfort of silence is where the magic is. Like that's where you really tap into the soul essence. But in that void, that is where everything is possible. And the new age, calls it manifestation. Like, oh, when you tap into the surrender, it's manifestation. By the way, that's ego. Like, that's all ego. If you're trying to get something out of this, that's completely ego. But the void is where you're open to divine guidance, where you're open to growth, where you're open to whatever you're meant to do on this planet. And so, it's really disorienting when you start to step into that level of freedom because a lot of us are used to living in these little boxes that are safe and we're contained. And it's kind of like the analogy of religion being a little goldfish in a bowl and spirituality being all the fish in the ocean. You go from a little bowl to an ocean and you're like, oh my God, like what's out there? It's scary. Like sharks could get me, or I could get struck down by lightning or some kind of jellyfish, whatever. Like you get into this fear. And that's something that I, have had to really undo. Like I was used to the safety, air quote, of a 9 to 5 job. So when I became a business owner years ago, it wasn't until like probably 6 months ago, and I've been on this journey for quite a while, that I felt safe to not have a box. Like it took that much work. We're talking friggin' 4 years of work plus to like uncondition that I'm safe to be. I don't have to follow any rules and I don't have to look at anybody else to follow their path. Like I can just trust the surrendering. And there's a great book, and I didn't appreciate it at the time, but it's by Michael Singer called The Surrender Experiment. And I hated it. I read it like 4 years ago and I was like, that's stupid. This guy literally just like does whatever he's told and he just like follows every single opportunity. And I'm like, no way in hell. I wasn't ready for that. At this point in my life, you better believe I can certainly surrender to the higher purpose and trust that I can be divinely guided. But that's being in true surrender. That's not having an agenda or having the ego. And that's what I couldn't appreciate at the time was like, this guy had done so much ego work that he was in a true state of kind of oneness with God, where he was like, all right, use me. Let me be an instrument of your work. And it worked out magnificently. And I need to go back and reread it because I think at another point here, I have such a different appreciation for, how it worked out. And if you read that book, like his ending, air quote ending, is magnificent. Like what he created in the process of surrendering, or rather what was created through him. Let's just say that because that's, it was created through him, was profound. So if you're in that place of like, I don't know what's next, just as much as possible. And people are like, how do I surrender? It's that continual, just like, okay, I don't know what's next. God, please guide me. That's it. Like, I talk to my clients about pattern interrupt, and that's like a shifting of your attention when ego brain gets loud and starts to get crazy. So shift your attention. If the ego starts to be in overdrive of, we got to figure out how to pay these bills. We've got to figure out how to get childcare set up for next year because my daycare lady's leaving and I only have 9 months to do this. And we've got to figure out the next job we have, blah, blah, blah. Like literally in those moments, you just stop the thought process as soon as you can catch it and just, it's okay. It'll work out. That's all you do. You don't fight the ego. You don't want to do that because the ego will always, it's like trying to take down a pit bull that's angry. Like you're not going to win. It's just going to keep yapping at you. So as much as possible, if you're in that void and you're uncomfortable, just continue to surrender it. Trust it. Just be like, okay, this is uncomfortable and I can do this. I trust. And if you're someone who prays, like pray more, meditate more, ask for signs, or even just, you can ask spirit guides, angels, God, for just a sign you're on the right path. Be like, please just let me know that I've got this. And I swear you will get something. You just have to tune in. It might be some angel numbers. It might be a little butterfly flying across your window. It might be, someone that says something to you throughout that day. That's like, there it is. But you have to be open to receiving them too.
Yeah. And, there are things, like you said, that you can do, and it can be a little overwhelming. I know I found myself in that place of like, I get it, but I don't know where to start. And, it's a lot, there's a lot of noise in your head. And so the simple steps really come to when the noise gets to be a lot. Ego loves to create confusion and anxiety. Everybody's easier to control when they're afraid, they're anxious, and the ego, that's its survival mechanism. So if we can get still, and even if it's 5 minutes, if that's all you can do, really kind of think about what is it that's dying within me? What is maybe asking to be transmuted within me? And likewise, what maybe feels like it's trying to come in. And it can be anything. It can be truly anything at all. And if you can just start maybe every day, and maybe this is a fun little challenge for you and I, can we start our day with some stillness and some reflection? Like today, what is looking to be shed? Maybe that's a better way to put it. Like what should I release? And what am I making space for? What is asking to come in? So maybe release and space or welcoming. Those are prompts that I've been using a lot lately. And what really helps me, I'm going to pay this forward, is if we can have these prompts and find that in stillness, we can integrate that with our breath. I love breath work. And Robert Behedry, I think you can find him on Apple Music. I don't know why. I just love the guy. I think his voice is very soothing, but he leads through different breath works. And he has one I think it's called Calm and Relaxation, but he uses a 7-11 breath work, and you're just sitting up in a chair, cross-legged, whatever. And you do this for 6 minutes or so, and it's just nose breathing. And you're inhaling for 7 seconds. You hold at the top for 2 or 3 seconds, and then you exhale for 11 seconds, and you hold at the bottom for 2 or 3 seconds, and you just kind of keep going through this flow or whatever you can withstand. The goal is to bring yourself from inhaling shorter amounts of time than you're exhaling. So your exhale should be longer than your inhale. There's been a lot of scientific proof that it's the exhale that lowers the blood pressure, decreases anxiety. Essentially, it's what brings you back in to the peace within yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can take those prompts and that breath work, and you can even come up with one thing like, today I'm allowing myself to release this. Like maybe it's fear. Maybe it's fear around something specific. Maybe it's fear in general. Maybe it's anxiety. And then I'm allowing or welcoming in, calmness, peace, serenity, love, whatever it is that you would love more of. It takes time, and the breath work should help you feel it, because you touched on this earlier. A lot of this, we're past the point of affirmations here. Affirmations are bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's the manifestation culture. We're past that. If you're listening to this, we are past that. So what we really need to remember is that we have to embody this. It's the brain before body. You touched on this. We have to believe. We have to feel. It's the emotion that we connect to it that draws it closer to us, that puts the experience in front of us. It's so vital to the whole process. And that's because it's alignment. That's because you're then in flow with the divine. You are in sync, which is in you. You are not separate from God. Sorry if that triggers you again. It triggered me once upon a time too. So I would encourage you to just make it so simple and practice daily, practice throughout the day. The whole trick with the neurology of it is to make that feeling more common than the feeling you don't want. And life is still going to happen to you. Life still happens to us. We still get stuck in traffic. We still get devastating news. We still don't always feel our best. That's why the practice and the stillness and the breath work and the intention when you can is so massively vital to your rebirth. It really is. This is not a solo show. We don't just wake up one day and we're like, well, we're new and shiny. We had our spiritual awakening. I feel completely connected to God, and now everything in my life is going perfectly. It is not even close to how this happens. It happens through the trials getting bigger, because you're going to get better at growing in them. They're not meant to hurt you. They're meant to grow you. And
And
so I really love practicing this. And I know, Angie, you have tons of resources on that. So don't hesitate to reach out to Angie if you ever want to get into some of this, because that's totally her realm. But those are the things I like.
well, and you nailed it. I just want to reiterate, this is a practice. This is ongoing every single day, a dedication to your growth. You and I didn't get here just because we had a spontaneous awakening. We live and breathe this work and embody it. And, if you're ready for that kind of undertaking, hell yes, reach out. Like Jess and I would love to talk with you, connect with you, work with you, whatever. But we didn't get here simply by reading books. We embody it in everyday situations. We're analyzing our responses to it, saying, is this ego or is this heart? Is this soul self or spirit? And if it doesn't make you feel good, or it makes you feel really freaking good, it's probably ego. right? Like spirit self is very unattached. It doesn't get ruffled even when things are excellent. It's like, all right, lovely. I'm happy I'm having a nice experience. And oh, my dog died and I'm happy I had that time with him and I'm going to grieve because I'm human and I'm going to see the beauty in that and continue to surrender that. So, surrender all the emotions because the majority of them are going to be from ego. And I even read in a book recently and I love this, saying the inability to say no is also ego. You're not being godlike by saying yes and giving of yourself when you don't want to. That's very much ego, people pleasing tendencies, all of that. So it's a very layered thing. And again, it doesn't happen overnight, and this wisdom you're gaining is a process of continual work. It does not happen quickly. Spiritual awakenings are not, it's a lifelong journey, and many, probably hundreds, if not thousands of lives long of journey. It just happens to be, I think a lot of us that are here right now have had a lot of lives of experience and we're waking up quicker. We're remembering quicker. We're like, oh, yep, I failed that lesson last time. Let's not do that again. Okay. How can I learn through this, right? And that's the most beautiful way. I know we're getting a little long here, but I think this is such a valuable conversation. But it really is like, how can I learn from this? What am I meant to learn? You and I talk about that all the time with our health. What am I meant to learn from this? I'm meant to learn so I can help others. I'm meant to learn so I go inward more. I'm meant to learn so I slow the heck down. And so, this is just an invitation to begin to question some of the ego's antics. And I'm really excited to dive into the next episode. We're going to talk about going beyond the ego and really discovering that truer self. So thank you for your time today. And please join us next time because we're going to keep diving into this, 2 more episodes. And, this can go real deep. So we could continue to talk for a long time about this. So as always, questions or feedback, reach out, drop us an email. We're at therevolutionofbeing.com and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.